Well, ladies and gentlemen, we did have the Canadian election happen last night. Mark Carney and the Liberals won. Not too surprising. I will say, as the night matured, Poilievre and the Conservatives did gain more seats and brought it closer. You can see the total numbers right now, at least as it's projected. The Liberals with 166 seats, which is below the threshold of 172. There are questions, would they potentially form a coalition with the NDP, who right now is at 9 projected seats, the Bloc at 20 in Quebec, and the Conservatives, of course, at 147 in terms of that. Looking at a province-by-province breakdown, Alberta, very, very conservative. We're going to be talking about Alberta the majority of this video, possibly them separating from Canada. That is the key takeaway from this. Well, there's a lot of key takeaways, but that's a main key takeaway. You've also got a lot of people blaming Trump, Liberals blaming Trump. You would think they would like that because they get a liberal and a more globalist figure elected in Canada, but they just want any reason to blame Trump. So we're going to discuss that. But we are also going to take a look at the province-by-province breakdown. Alberta goes conservative. You do have British Columbia. Interesting, as the night went on, it looked like British Columbia could potentially go conservative, but it seems like it's going to finish as the votes come in right now, 97% chance of being liberal. Manitoba goes conservative, no surprise there. New Brunswick goes liberal. Newfoundland goes liberal. Nova Scotia goes liberal. Northwest Territories goes liberal. Nunavut, kind of interesting. Conservatives ticked up around 10%. At this point, it looks like maybe an NDP seat, but we'll see. They're still counting there. Ontario will go liberal. Prince Edward Island will go liberal. Quebec will go liberal. Saskatchewan will go conservative. That would be the ripple effect. If you look at the provinces that are conservative, that potentially are pissed off, fourth straight election, Liberals win. Would it be Alberta and then Saskatchewan? Would it just be Alberta? Would Alberta want to just be independent and then create some type of relationship with the United States to where we can protect them militarily and we get some type of free trade agreement with them? We don't know exactly how this is going to play out. If they did join the United States, it would be a process unless Trump fast-tracked it, but normally it's a standard 4 or 5 year process in terms of them being granted statehood. They'd get 8 or 9 electoral votes. There's also a lot of people questioning, when it comes to Alberta, are they actually conservative? Would they be more of a liberal state or a swing state when it comes to the United States? I think even if they're a swing state, they would be worth adding because we would be completely energy independent with Alberta because of their natural gas and oil. But Saskatchewan is kind of a secondary, more conservative state, but you could definitely argue in terms of a U.S. election and the United States political context, they would be classified as a swing state. And then you do also have Yukon. Very interesting with Yukon, where conservatives seemingly were getting good early results. There's only 1 seat, so what does it matter? But this is the territory that's right next to Alaska. And the idea is, and people also talk about potentially connecting Alaska to the lower 48, you would want Yukon and you would want BC. And it was interesting to see Yukon have it's just very smallly populated, but right now it does look like the Liberals will win the one singular seat in Yukon as well. So that is just the current situation there. By the way, Poilievre lost his seat himself, so pretty crazy. Poilievre out as conservative leader in 2025. Right now it's up to a 77% chance. It's a tough loss. I mean, if you take a look at the Canadian election, you go month by month. When Trump was inaugurated, Poilievre was at 84% chance. And so the question is, well, did Trump cause this? Was it a combination of things? I think it was a combination of factors. The issue is, and whether you want to blame Trump or not, it's really nonsensical either way. This is Canada. This is their political system. These are their elections. What do you want Trump to do? Hold their hands? You can say, well, Trump shouldn't have talked about annexing them, making the joke about Trudeau. Let's be very clear. This is a combination of things. The number one biggest reason Poilievre lost, even though previous liberal leadership had such horrible approvals like Trudeau at 16%, is because Canada is liberal. They're liberal. They have two major parties. It's not like the United States where it's just these 2 top parties. They've got like 3 parties. 2 of them are liberal. The 2 liberal parties saw that the conservative had more support. They galvanized together. That's why the NDP only has 8 or 9 seats right now, because they galvanized with the Liberal Party. Now, if you want to talk about coalitions, you may have more of a point in terms of the NDP and the Liberal getting over 172. If Trump didn't talk much about this election, maybe it'd be a bit lower. We understand. But the point is, this is a liberal liberal country. So they're going to vote for liberals. That's just the reality. Now, you could say if Trump just shut up and didn't say anything, but that's not how Trump doesn't care. He likes America. This is what I would tell people last night. Whether Poilievre wins or Carney wins, it's really irrelevant. Canada is still extremely dependent on us. I will say the main way it's relevant, and this is what we're going to get to, the main part of the video, is because of Alberta. And you can see the articles already coming out. Hockey and nostalgia won't keep us together. Albertans say they're serious about separation after a Liberal win. The Liberals' fourth straight federal election win keeps Alberta and Ottawa on a collision course. And so this is really what we're going to see when it comes to Danielle Smith, the premier in Alberta. She originally, about 3 or 4 months ago, said, no, that's nonsensical. We're not going to do it. Then 2 months ago, she said, yeah, we're thinking about it. I'm listening to people, and we might set up a focus group, like a panel of people to gauge a referendum. And there's a chance that there could be a referendum in the next 3 to 6 months to secede from Canada. Now, the Canadian government is going to try and keep Alberta, and Alberta has to know that they are extremely valuable when it comes to Canada, the Equalization Act, the amount of money that they give Eastern Canada in the form of billions and billions of dollars. If you're Carney and this Canadian government, it would behoove you to negotiate with Alberta if something happened to where there was a referendum and they said we're ready to leave. Now, the other question is, does Trump do something to try and facilitate this? Because the only thing that Trump has said is, we want all of Canada, which doesn't make any sense. They're extremely liberal. It's 55 electoral votes for the full state. You're talking about a California 2.0. And so that's why I would say it seems a lot more likely that you would get this movement within Alberta to where they would potentially become independent. This is a thing to where you're going to have to gauge it within Canada and within Alberta specifically in terms of the public polling after this election, because you take the temperature on the polls, it's about 30% want to leave. Well, or it might have been 40%. It was like 30 to 40% that wanted to leave. After this, I mean, it is a liberal minority, but if they got a coalition with the NDP, they probably got over 172. They're still counting the seats. We don't know for sure. The point of it is, if there are conservative Canadians within Alberta that would want to secede but become independent of the United States. And the thing is, when you look at the geographical position of Alberta, they really feasibly can do it. They would get military protection from the United States, just like Canada does. But there's no one that's going to invade Alberta based off of their geographical location. So they really don't need like this crazy military. Now, Trump will offer them that if they join the United States, and I think they would be conservative. I think they would vote in a similar way to Ohio, where they'd be +8, +10 conservative. You could argue, well, they're the Texas of Canada. It's more of a, kind of a figure of speech because of how much oil and gas they have. But when you look at the situation, if they have a referendum, it's not as simple as just having the referendum and leaving. There's multiple steps to it in terms of negotiations with the Canadian government. Although, honestly, because of the situation with the United States, if Trump wanted to do this and help facilitate, he could say, we recognize Alberta as independent. I'm really not sure what the Canadian government could do after that because of the power dynamic between the United States and Canada. If the United States says they had a referendum, they voted to be independent, we recognize it, what can the Canadian government really do? Are they going to go against the United States? Would Alberta be interested? See, the question is, do they want to secede and be independent, or do they want to secede and join the United States as a territory and then a state, or just even as a territory? And then after Alberta leaves, this is just a speculation, would Saskatchewan, which is also more conservative, probably comparable to Michigan in terms of their voting, so they're a swing state, but they're more conservative by Canadian standards we saw with this election. Would they be next in line? And then after that, Manitoba, BC, and then you're talking about the territories as well, which, by the way, Yukon was more conservative this election. Now, I'm not saying it would be conservative in an American election. They would be a territory. They would not get an electoral vote. Yukon would if we acquired them. I'm not saying we're going to acquire Yukon. This is all just speculation based off of what I can think, what might happen in terms of the dominoes. And you also have Quebec, who's tried seceding for decades from Canada. If all of Eastern Canada goes, what happens to Quebec? That's the problem with taking Alberta. It could cause a cascade domino effect to where, okay, we'll take Western Canada and we'll bring them in. Alberta and Saskatchewan, they might be conservative. Manitoba's probably a swing, but you look at Manitoba, people compare it to Minnesota, probably 5 or 6 point Dem win in an American election. BC's liberal, there's no doubt about it. BC's at, Oregon, it's the coastal. Vancouver, it's very liberal. The rural areas are more conservative, but BC is liberal. BC's about, what is it, 8 or 9 electoral votes. And then you bring in the 3 territories. The 3 territories are liberal, but it doesn't matter because they're not getting votes. They'd be territories. They would stay territories. I mean, we currently have territories, so, and they would fit into that role. And you'd also get Greenland, and then you'd have full control of the Northwest Passage. You'd have full or at least partial control of the Hudson Bay as well. So the question now is, how serious is Alberta about this? It wasn't a crazy stomping, but if these numbers are correct in terms of Polymarket, there could be a coalition potentially that's formed. And you even look at the popular vote. The popular vote's like a point difference right now. Carney's winning, but it's extremely close. But right now you're looking at 166. You know what? There's also other props here that I'm going to look at because there's a lot of you can see Carney at 99, liberal minority at a 96%. Right, we know it's going to be a liberal minority at this point. The question is, how many seats will they win? How many will NDP win? Is there a coalition formed if it's over 172? Right now, it's expected to be about a total of 175, 176 seats, which would allow them to form a coalition. But I also have heard people out of Canada say, well, Carney's really not liked. This win was not good enough. Well, now they've got him at 171. Weren't they just at 166? Yeah, so listen, this is like unstable. I don't know why it would be that. Oh, this is like this. I don't even know what this is. Yeah, so it wasn't updated. So 168, NDP 9, 177. That's a majority if they have a coalition. But I've heard that there's, if Carney has bad leadership, there's going to be another election relatively soon in Canada. They can do that where they can call elections within a year. So maybe there'll be another election soon. But Poilievre, it seems like with him losing his seat, he's going to be out when it comes to conservative leadership there. So they're going to be looking to replace him. We'll see if that ends up happening. This was a very bad loss when you look at the context for the Conservatives in Canada. If you're talking about I mean, obviously Canada is liberal, we know that, but you're looking at coming into the year where, by the way, they didn't have the election. They were not planning on having the election until, I believe it was October, like October 20th. But you can call it early, and once Trudeau stepped down, they called it early, and Carney took over, and they had momentum, so they called it. But whether you want to blame this on Trump, it's really not. It doesn't matter. Trump is an American. He cares about the United States. The United States is going to be put first under Trump. So, yeah, there's going to be downblast effects. And so I guess Canadians were not happy how Trump treated them. They parlayed that into having this animosity against Poilievre because he's conservative like Trump, even though Poilievre came out against Trump. And that's why American conservatives were kind of angry at Poilievre, even though it makes total sense for him to, because Trump is radioactive when it comes to Canadian politics. They hate him 100%. But this was like full ported. I mean, this went from like a 95% victory for Poilievre in terms of odds to Carney at a 99%. So very interesting updates there. This is not surprising in terms of how this worked out at all, just in terms of the province by province. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba going conservative. Alberta, the heaviest conservatives, then Saskatchewan, then Manitoba. Some surprises within BC. There were some early movements in terms of some districts in Eastern Canada that Poilievre flipped. That's why he went up to about a 35 to 40% chance to win about 30 or 40 minutes after the first polls closed at 7 o'clock. But it didn't matter. It was a short-lived thing. And once the polls closed in Ontario at 9:30, that's when, and also Quebec, that's when we really started seeing the Liberal victory. Although I will say the Conservatives brought it back later on in the night, at least slightly, so it wasn't a Liberal majority. It does look like it's going to be a minority. And so this map does not surprise me at all. But the point of it is, when it comes to Alberta, you can see this. This is just the mock of it. This is all of Canada if they all became states. Again, I do not think these territories would be states. They would not get electoral votes. They would be Liberal, I would agree. Again, Yukon's kind of interesting to see how conservative it was, at least. Not that it matters. It still went Liberal, and that's the Canadian election. Obviously, American conservatives are more hardcore, but you can see Alberta, Saskatchewan potentially both conservative. Alberta more to the right. Manitoba, a swing state but slightly liberal. BC, pretty solidly liberal. I would say maybe even BC more liberal than the shade of blue that they have it. And then you'd be looking at these. I mean, this is what you want. You want this area right now, maybe even not even Manitoba, but you would want this. This would give you full control to the Arctic. You'd also have Greenland. And so this is what we'd be looking at. So that would be really, honestly, the hypothetical could just be Alberta and Alberta alone, maybe Alberta and Saskatchewan, maybe just Alberta in terms of an economic relationship where they're still independent. So the next thing that has to happen is momentum within the government of Alberta to want to have a referendum to secede from Canada and Trump to endorse it. And if it gets 65, 70% approval in terms of leaving, then we're really talking about something. And I'm sure we're going to get opinion polls and everything like that, and there's going to be gauged interest on it. And we'll have to see if there's a coalition and all the inner workings of Canadian politics and how crazy are they going to go with liberal policies and what is Carney going to do his first few days. That's all going to affect this as well in terms of how much ball does he want to play with Alberta in terms of their demands and how frustrated they are with yet another. I mean, we'll see how long it ends up being. 3, 4 years, 5 years. It could just be a year, depending on how quickly they call an election, but another time period of liberal leadership. So that is where we stand right now. If you wanted Alberta to join the United States, you did like the results. You would have probably preferred a liberal majority because then the Albertans would feel even more bleak. But this is the result you would want if you want Alberta to leave Canada and to potentially split up Canada. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.